Malo Pomalo, welcome to this episode of Pomalo Sports Podcast, where we have a very special guest, Ivan Perasović, who is a strength and conditioning coach here with Nogometni Klub Dugopolje. He's also a former strength and conditioning coach of Al Nassr and used to also work for Kaka Split. So definitely someone who knows what they're talking about. And not only that, you are a three-time senior national champion in Olympic weightlifting, and you have a first-degree black belt in judo.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining our podcast, and
No
thank
problem.
you for your time.
It's a pleasure.
We can start with Dugopolje,
Yes.
since you're here now. Are there any special training methods that you use to improve players' performances?
Before the matches?
Yeah.
No, it's usually, especially when I came on the half of the seasons we came, so in January, before the start of the second half. So usually you do the pre-season training sessions. Nothing too much special. Usually it's just the microcycles that you do all over again. You don't have any big things to do, especially at the middle of the season. Most of the things you do that matter really are at the beginning of the season. In the middle, you just bring them up to date. You just refresh them a little bit so they go into the next part of the season fresh and hopefully with no injuries. But no special methods, especially right now and in the closing season. So it's just relax and try not to get anyone injured.
What would you say is the biggest difference you've noticed being here compared to your time in Al Nassr?
Well, the biggest difference is, especially when I was in the first team, of course, that's a much bigger level of professionalism and football in general. But a job is a job, and football players are same all over the world where you ever go. But the biggest difference is, I believe, is in the mentality of the players you have to work with. Yes, they are similar, but it's the cultural differences here and there are much bigger. Yes, we did have European players from the West, Brazil and so on. So with them, you're used to training because you are from the West. But with the Saudi players and so on, their mentality is a little bit different, and the language barrier is also a bit different, so a bit harder than working, like, for instance, here in Croatia, where football is, it's more of a traditional sport. It's widespread, and so it's similar but also different in some ways to get used to it, especially as a young coach.
Did you have to learn Arabic or?
It's a pretty hard language to learn, actually. You learn just some of the basic stuff, stop, go, good, bad, just the basic stuff that so you can, go with the players, but you have a translator there always, so if some players don't know English or something like that, you can always communicate with the translator. So, but usually all the players, all the ones know English, so it's not that easy. It's not that hard. I mean,
how do you here integrate recovery and prevention strategies into a training program?
Well, to integrate recovery and preventing injury is depends. But first and foremost, you have to always keep in mind that the players keep themselves up to date with the trainings, and they take care of themselves out of the field. That's the first and foremost step. And when I was in Al Nassr, we had all these instruments, from catapult to catapult GPS, from doctors and so on, nutritionists. So your job is much easier. You know exactly how much you put the pressure on them, and are they tired or not. You have it all in numbers. In Dugopolje, it's a lower league, so you don't have that much of those things that we had there. But nevertheless, it's basically always the same. You see them, you have your experience. I'm experienced enough, and also the head coach is experienced enough to see how the players feel. So you just tempo them through feeling, but also you know how the microcycle goes from one game to another game. So you try to always implement those things during the training sessions during the week, especially the prevention ones. I always try to do that before the start of the main training. So you always implement those little things, because the thing is, you don't have always time during the training session, and so you have to do it step by step. And of course, you give the players what to do at home and what they can do outside the field, which is always important. And that's basically the most important thing, is you don't always have time to implement all those things that you want to implement during the training session, during that microcycle. So, but usually the players are all professionals and they work outside of the training time, so they always work on themselves and they try to keep those things up to date.
You mentioned that it's very different to come to a club in January when the season is halfway through. How will your next year differ from this?
Well, if I stay, it will be different, because you will have everything from the beginning. So you will know the players, you will know the training method they started with, they transitioned with, and they finished with. So it's always hard to go into a club and start with a team that already in some program, in some motion, especially at the middle of the season or at the end of the season. So you don't know the players, you get to know the players, you have to see what they did before, how they react to certain things. So it takes time, especially, okay, if you're more experienced, it's easier, and if you're a little less, which I'm always learning, I'm still fresh behind the ears when it comes to this sort of work. I'm in the football business for maybe 2 years, 1.5 years, working with teams. Working individually, I've been already doing that for 7 or something years, but working with the team is different. So the difference is, of course, you have everything under control when you start with them and when you finish them. Yeah. So that will be way easier if I start with them at the beginning of August and when I finish with them.
Perfect. Now you worked in Al Nassr, of course, and in the past few years there's been a lot of notable players that have gone to Saudi Arabia. One who I think everyone has asked you about is Cristiano Ronaldo. But what was it like working with those high-profile players like Ronaldo and Laporte or Mane?
Talisca. We had Luis Gustavo, Talisca, and Ospina, goalkeeper, and Ronaldo, from players that are like bigger players, especially here in Europe and in the world in general. It's easy. They're professionals. You will be amazed at how easy it is to work with professionals. Although he is like a big star, big name, and some guy from Split who you never heard of and who's younger than you comes to you and like gives you some exercises to do. But in general, he's really respectful. All of them are, if you respect them, of course. And you won't have any problems with them, because if you're normal, if you're respectful to them, if you do your job with care and knowledge, they see it, of course, and they listen. You can work with them. So all in all, it was a great experience working with such top level players, especially their mentality as how they approach working out and training, because the thing about younger players now is they have to have that tenacity, that drive, will to go to the training session, training in general. Just because you don't want to doesn't matter. You have to go there. So that drive that they have is quite inspiring, actually, and good to know, good to have, good experience, actually.
Are there any specific requirements that veteran players have in their strength and conditioning training compared to younger players?
Yes, of course. Older players that are above 30 something years old, you have to always take care a little bit more of them than younger players, because they already had a lot of seasons, a lot of training behind their years, and usually maybe they have some injuries, past injuries, and you always have to take special care of them in terms of giving them a little bit more flexibility when it comes to training. So younger players are something else. They have to work hard, they have to train hard, and of course you take care of them, but always the older players have a little bit more flexibility in their training, so you will spare them a little bit maybe, or give them something extra or something different that suit their needs more than younger players. Yes.
Yeah. There are maybe hundreds of stories on how crazy Cristiano is when it comes to training and how much he trains.
Yes.
Was that visible still in Al Nassr?
Yes, but I wouldn't call that like fanaticism. He just approaches training as it's his job.
Yeah.
So he takes care of it. He takes care of himself, his body, because he knows that his body that's what produces his it produces on the field. So that's his product, and he takes care of it with great care. And the thing about him is, it's not something out of this world that he does. It's just he's consistent. So he just works out and trains with just the consistency and tenacity as anyone should do. So he's just focused on it and does those things. And when you do it for 20 years, 30, how long he's been doing it, it comes together also. So that's he really has that work ethic that's quite to be admired of. Actually, he's 39 years old now, and he still works like he's 20.
Yeah.
So of course he knows how to prep himself, how to tone himself for the upcoming games. But he still works out. It's not like I don't want to go to the gym. Nobody wants to go to the gym all the time. It's not. If you want to go, you have to go, because that's what gives him his durability, his longevity on the field.
Absolutely. Did you have any difficulties integrating into the Saudi culture, or like out of work?
Yeah, well, it was quite a cultural shock to come to Saudi Arabia. Especially, I've been around the world. I've traveled, but I never lived outside of Croatia for extended periods of time, especially not in a country like that, which is, completely different culture than what you have here in the West. And it was challenging at first. Everything is new. You have to get used to them. But after a month or two, it becomes a routine. So you get used to it. It's not the easiest thing because of that big cultural difference. Like, for instance, if we went to Germany or Spain or somewhere in Europe, I imagine it's a bit easier than going to those Eastern countries. Not because it's something going to happen to you. It's just that the culture is that much different than, for instance, in Europe here.
You went to work with the first team of Al Nassr. You worked with the youth.
Yes.
What would you say are the biggest differences in working with the youth compared to the first team?
Well, working with the youth, first and foremost, like I said, in the youth team you have only Saudis, no foreign players, so you have only Saudi kids, Arabian kids. Well, the difference is, as in every academy versus the senior team and the first team, you have kids who are in development and who you have to guide towards what they want to do and what to achieve. You have to see what they're capable of, see where their weaknesses are, strengths are, and work on them, both of them. One of the biggest challenges was also the language. And usually their culture, they're really talented, but they're not used to training so much as in, for instance, here in the West. But they're extremely talented. They have extremely good capabilities, from motor capabilities to functional capabilities. They're really, really, really good. But you have to guide them. You have to teach them a lot. You have to. When you work with a senior, it's usually, especially with those professionals, you tend to give them an exercise or a training. They'll do it because they know all the movements, they know all the exercises. With the kids, of course, it's different, especially with the younger ones who never been at the gym or never did any conditioning training for football in general. So you have to teach them from scratch, actually. And the language was the most difficult thing, is because it's hard to explain to a kid you want to do it like this, some exercise, and he doesn't understand English, and you have to have a translator. So you have to show a lot of those things. You have to visually show them a lot of things. So usually, no matter if it's football, basketball, or some other sports, working with the young ones is always to teach them how to train, to teach them when to train and how to use the gym properly, and all the other exercises, warming up, stretching, to learn basic hygiene for their bodies, as in, stretching, warming up, prevention training. Those are all the things that you teach young players at that age. Yeah. And when you climb up the ladder, you improve the training. So it's no longer just learning for them how to warm up. Now you're learning them how to train, when to use certain exercises, how to use them, so that they don't get injured. And you have prevention training also.
Yeah. Do you working with the youth of Al Nassr? Are there any future superstars there?
Well, they are talented players, a lot of talented players. Time will tell if they're gonna be good, stay good, of course. But you would be surprised as to how many good football players and athletes in general they have. It's just that their tradition in sports in general is not that big as in, for instance, here in Europe. For instance, here in Split, I don't know, you know how big of a sport culture we have, or somewhere else in Europe, but they have the capabilities, and now they're starting to adapt to modern things and training as they should be. So maybe someday they will have some big names, surely.
Yeah, and I know you went to Al Nassr after all the money moves.
Yes.
But would you say football is on the rise in Saudi?
Yes, definitely.
It's a
Definitely.
big part of
they like football. They like watching sports, and it's the quality of how they play did improve. You have lots of European coaches, European players who did raise the bar for the football there, and they play really good. They play really good. So it's on the rise. It's definitely on the rise, and it will keep on rising, I think, for the next time being.
Yeah. About KK Split,
yes,
or Basketball Club Split for international audience. How different is it working with professional basketball than it is to work with professional football?
Well, quite different when you look at it from a technical standpoint, from how we use the training methods, the training sessions. Is quite different, two very different sports. But when you look at the psyche of the players and the team, it boils down always to the same thing. You have the same patterns always in every athlete, I would say, especially in team sports. The main difference is implementing techniques afterwards. So kids usually learn always the basic stuff. So they learn how to the basic movements and so on. So that they do track and field exercises, and so lots of those things, so they get the movements right, learn how to run, learn how to walk. So, but once they get older, you can see definitely that in basketball you have a bigger you focus much more on the gym, as in you use much more weights than you would use actually in football, which is you still use them, but a lot less. Yeah. Than for instance in basketball, and well, it's quite different actually. It's two completely different sports. You use hands, you use feet, smaller pitch, bigger pitch, less players, more players, bigger distances running. So you use a lot of more contact in basketball than in football. So you use different methods always. So it's quite different actually.
And how did you prepare a team for the physical demand of a basketball season?
Well, first and foremost, it was quite challenging for me when I came to the team, because I trained individually, and I was in individual sport, first judo, then weightlifting. So it was quite challenging for me to adapt to, in general, to adapt to a team, because it was, for me, it was okay. I knew what to do with the exercises. I knew in theory what to do, but to do it and to learn to give them during the season what to do, how to do it, was all a big challenge for me. And when I came to football, also big challenge to adapt to the conditions on the field, to use the field more accurately, more precise during the training sessions and before the game, after the game. But preparing the team, you have a cycle, as always. So you have a periodization. You know when the games are. You know when you have the preparing times, the sessions, so seasons. So basically, the methodology implies always the same in football and basketball. You have 5 days, for instance, before a game, or maybe sometimes 2 or 3, and you just go from slow to fast, from easy to complicated, complex more, and from weaker to bigger weights, lighter to heavy weights. That's how you do it, actually. And of course, implementing rehabilitations and prevention protocols, always same thing, actually, but also different because of the things they have to do on the basketball field and the things they have to do on the football field. So you always have to take care of those things, because try not to tire them out too much during your training, your part, my part in the gym or on the pitch, and try to keep them always fresh so they can do what the coach wants them to do.
You worked a bit over 4 years in Kaka Split, if I'm not mistaken.
More close to 5, 4 and maybe 9, 10 months, something like that.
Personally,
Yeah.
do you prefer working with basketball or football, or is it just really the same?
Well, it's always a bit different. From my experience, basketball players tend to be more engaged in the gym than a regular football player, but that is changing. More and more players always now tend to work more in the gym, usually, but preferring half. To be honest, it's the same for me. A job is a job, so I adapt to those things. So either be it football, basketball. What I like more, well, I would say football. Football a little bit more. I've grown to love it over these past 2 years, and from my experience that I gathered so much. But usually working with the team has its own benefits, and doesn't matter which team it is, from what sports. For me, it's always challenging, but it's fun. Because you have the games, you have the matches, you have. It's always dynamic. You always have lots of things to do. It's never boring, and it depends on the players you have to work with. But usually, all my experiences are mostly positive, be it working with basketball or football.
And in your last few years working with football, have you seen any developments in the way footballers work or the way you conduct work with them?
Surely. The science and the techniques go always. They're rapidly growing. More and more things you have at your disposal. More studies show certain things that were once used, now they are used less because of certain new findings they found. It develops. Now you have, for instance, prior, like 10 years ago, you have lots of technology available to you at a much cheaper price than it was. 10 years ago, it wasn't available at all. Doesn't matter the price. Now you can have recovery items for recovery boots. You can have reaction lights. You can have lots of training methods, lots of training equipment who you just didn't have 10, 20 years ago, and some methodology. For instance, how to prevent injuries, how to recover a player after the game, how to bring back a player after an injury. So you have much more at your disposal than you had like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm in the business, working as a coach for now, maybe 9, maybe 10 years. And when I finished college, I started to work as a coach at the gym. And ever since then, when I started to work with athletes, maybe 1 year or 2 years after I finished college, it has grown a lot. So you have to keep up with the time and the studies that show certain things.
You mentioned the gym. You
Yes.
are the owner of your own
Yes.
gym,
Yes.
As well as working with Dugopolje.
Yes.
If you want, you can plug your gym now, or you can talk if you would like to tell us what you do in your gym.
Well, my gym is just a small gym doing strength and conditioning, mostly with athletes, but also with some recreational people, so who are amateurs, and so also doing with football players, basketball players, tennis players, prevention protocols, just to keep them fresh, and maybe if you have time, of course, to develop some skills that they have or that they're maybe weaker in them, or maybe they want to develop something more. Basically that's it. That's what I do.
Yeah.
So mostly now this is now the end of the season, so usually players come in that time when they have rest, and before the new season starts, they tend to come like maybe a week, maybe 10 days. One day depends on where they play. Maybe they have a little bit more, maybe a little less, but they do some basic preparations to come to fully prepared on the next part of the season, at the beginning of the season actually.
In a previous episode that we filmed with Professor Nicholas Creel, he mentioned that cyclists nowadays who aren't doping are driving faster than back in the days when everyone was doping. Do you think that's physically possible?
Well, I'm not well versed in either cycling or physiology of doping, but in my opinion, it's natural that the sport evolves. I mean, you have better materials, better bikes, I assume, lighter ones, but all sports is now much more faster, stronger than they previously was. I mean, you just look up a game of basketball or football like 20, 30 years ago. It's a quite different sport than it is now, and that goes for all sports, even individual sports. So it's not out of the blue that you have better results. The methodology of training is also improved, so you have to understand that. It's like I said, it's always evolving. You get new things, so you have better recovery. You better know how to follow someone. As in, you can measure certain things that you couldn't measure like 20 years ago. You can now measure them right on the field or in the gym. Beforehand, you have to go to the lab to measure certain things. Now you have those things basically in your pocket, so you can follow them more and be more precise. So it's not out of the blue that they're faster now than they were. But if they're using those sort of things, that I wouldn't know, because I'm not that well versed in doping. But it's, for me, it's natural that the sports is evolving. Doesn't matter which one, Yeah. The technology just keeps improving, and the training methods everything keeps improving. So it's natural actually, if you ask me.
And what do you think the future of athletic training looks like?
The future of sports is actually, like I said, I'm more of a conservative guy when it comes to training. I'm not a big fan of the online coaching and I give you what to train and then I go away. I think how the technology is evolving, and we're getting new insights how the body works, how the physiology of some injuries occurs, and how to better prevent them and how to better heal them. I think it's gonna be more and more, in one hand, easier to train because you're gonna have a lot of data at your disposal that usually before you didn't have. But it's also gonna be a little bit more challenging because just because you have those data, you're gonna have to know how to use them and when to use them exactly. So it's gonna be bigger. I mean, sport is moving on, so it's gonna be much more faster, much more stronger than it was before, and we're gonna have, I think, good, especially the games will improve, be much more interesting, much more faster, much more dynamic, and what we as coaches will have to always look is to try to prevent injuries and keep the players healthy and prepared for whatever the coaches and the game expects of them to do. So, and with the new technologies rising, it's gonna be easier, like I said.
Yeah. And about preventing injuries, I'm very interested about your opinion on this. In football, especially the big leagues,
Yeah.
the players are playing more and more games
Yes.
every year, and now they're adding Club World Cup. They're opening it up for more teams, so a football player can play 60-something games a year.
Yes, that's a lot.
And do you think it's too much at this point, or at what point are we looking at like torturing players instead of having them play a game?
Well, yes, it's true. More and more games are now coming in the season. You have much more games, especially with what you said, all of those things rising. Listen, like I said, with the technology, you're gonna have much better insight as how they work, how their bodies work, and I think with proper nutrition, proper resting, proper training, they can do it. But it's gonna be challenging, and time will tell, because in basketball, a lot of basketball players have a lot of games, especially in the NBA. They have sometimes 2-3 games a week, which is wild.
And 82 games in a season.
Yes, that's really big. But football is also coming there, so and it's a longer game. You play more, so we'll see. I hope for the players' sake that, especially in the big clubs, they have really good healthcare. They have really good doctors. They have really good physiotherapists. So they get the treatment they need in order to recover from those games. But also now that has come to show, players are being more and more aware of how much strength and conditioning is important for them. Recovery is important for them. So you won't be seeing players going out too much. If they want to succeed, if they want to do this tempo, they're gonna have to use that free time for recovery, for prevention training, and so on. So challenging because the sport is evolving. It's moving much faster. You can see, even when you see how much they run now versus how much they ran, for instance, 20 years ago, it's a big difference. So, you know, but the thing is, like when I was in Saudi, we were always astounded at how the players are playing when in such heat, because you know, we come here like, okay, it's hot in summer, but there it's humid and hot. In some places 40, 50 degrees, and when you see them, they're running 90 minutes, they're running in a good tempo. So, but then you figure out that they're used to it, so they grown into it. Yeah. So it's much easier for them than it was for us. Same thing applies with the sports. The kids will learn to adapt to it, because they will start at a young age and gradually build up to that intensity when they grow older.
And as a quick follow-up question to this, I'd love to hear your opinion on, I think it was 2 seasons ago when Pedri of Barcelona came into the first team, and he played every game of the season, including Europe, and then went on to play the Olympics in one season. I think he played 50, 60, 70 games in 1 year, or during a season as an, I think, 18-year-old. Do you think for such a young player it's too much to push that much, or is it just, as you said, if you get used to it, then?
Well, that also depends individually. I think when you get used to it, you can play. Not all of those games were at the high intensity that some games were, of course, but you have to give them time to recover. But I think he got used to it. He went to all the ages building up to that level. So, like I said, more and more players, and usually the game as itself is evolving. So even the training sessions evolve, and the younger ones are now training differently than they trained 20, 30 years ago. So they're adapting, and they will adapt, continue to adapt. So I wouldn't say it was too much for him, but he's not injured, right? He's
he's fine.
So he did adapt to it, and he will continue to adapt. And all the big players now, all the young players now, you see, then you have a selection, of course, because not everybody goes to the first team. So you pick out those ones who tend to have that physique, and now you have to have also technique and physique. Before you had like players who were like physical players, you have technical players. You have to be everything. You have to be complete. So someone playing at the high level profile will surely be prepared for everything that you throw at him. Whereas if you'd like to put someone who was in some lower league, give him a high level players or something like that, of course he wouldn't keep up with them because he's not used to that kind of tempo. You can see that, for instance, when you have some games where friendly matches, when some good high-profile team plays with some lower team, you can see the difference as to how they react, how they move, and you can see that even if the game is 90 minutes for both of them, but you can see at the end of the game that the high-level team has didn't break a sweat, while the other one was struggling. So you see, so that's why. I think it's just natural for those things to come.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ivan. This was
thank you.
Extremely interesting, honestly. Thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man.
And the pleasure was mine.
Thank you for watching another episode of Pomalo Sport Podcast, and we'll see you in the next one. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.